Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Welcome to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. This is your host, Ryan Singer, your buddy, Ryan Singer. I'm excited today. And you're like, yes, Ryan, you're always excited. And for damn good reason, because we get to have Sylvia Shults back on the program today. We're talking about the new book. I guess we could, I mean, I don't want to say brand new, but it's a brand new book. We're going to talk about the brand new book, Gone on Vacation, Haunted Zoos, Museums, and Amusement Parks. And I can't wait to get into it. Experience 254 from the year 2019, before the great change. It was the first time that Sylvia and I got on the mics and talked about the Peoria State Hospital, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And that was such a fun chat. And I'm glad to have you back. How you doing? Thanks for doing it.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I am delighted to be back. Boy, has it really been that long? Wow.
I can't believe it. Well, I mean, because it hasn't been that long since we've seen each other.
Right.
But because we had a fun kind of get together with a few friends
That was
last
so
time I was in
great.
Illinois. That was great.
Yeah.
That was a fun time. And
Oh, that restaurant has closed and reopened under different management. It's now a taco place.
oh,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. They have like cheeseburger tacos and pulled pork tacos. It's amazing. You have to come
oh,
in.
Mike, wow, yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to talk to Chris and get back out to Mason City, because I mean it's a short little genre. I got to get out there. That's definitely on the to-do list next time I'm in. I'm out in those parts. So tell me about. I mean, so people can kind of catch up if they want to. They can go back and they can listen to Experience 254, and because we got into a few things in that conversation. But so let's just kind of assume that people are going to do that, and we don't have to like rehash the entire like origin story and all this other kind of stuff. And let's just kind of get into what you've been up to since the last time we chatted, and we can start with the new book, and then we can go backwards from there, or however you want.
Let's see where the conversation takes us.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I have a new book out. It is called Gone on Vacation. This is a book that has been in the works for quite some time, and it's finally out into the world, and now I can talk about it. And it's just a bunch of fun. It's exactly what it says: haunted zoos, museums, and amusement parks. And this is the book that I just would have been thrilled to bits to find on the shelf when I was a kid at the LaGrange Public Library.
It's like, be the change you want to see in the world,
Yeah,
right?
write the
Right.
book that you would want to read. Oh yeah, it's dedicated to my childhood self, quite honestly, because yeah, this is just a fun book.
Well, that's awesome. And I think so often people, maybe from the outside looking in, sometimes forget that when it comes to the world of the paranormal, and specifically, we're talking about paranormal nonfiction here.
Mhm.
And how many books have you written now total?
This is number 9.
Wow. That is
This is number
impressive.
9 of the nonfiction.
Wow. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, you're in double digits then total. Like,
Yeah.
um, but I think people forget that there's a real joy and there's a fun element, right? To the original spark of interest that kind of, lights a fire in us when we're younger, when it comes to a lot of these like supernatural stories and the unexplainable. And so many of us, kind of tuck that spark and that flame away, and then others, revisit it or have just let it burn the whole time. And I do love this idea that it's supposed to be fun, right? And it's supposed to be like exciting and interesting, and not
Yeah.
that there aren't dark elements, I suppose, right? I mean, we all know that, but I love that there's real joy imbued in the work that you do.
Yeah. There were a couple of stories in here that did tend toward the darkness, and one of them I have I write about a lot of crazy stuff and a lot of dark stuff. I mean, in order to have a ghost story, somebody has to die. And, it's usually historical, so that's to be expected. But yeah, I write true crime too, so that also kind of veers into the dark storyness. But this is the first book in which I had a story in which I really felt that I owed it to my readers to put a trigger warning in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, first book ever, and I've done true crimes, so yeah, there was one zoo story that got pretty horrible. It was hard to write, and it's going to be hard to read. So let's talk about something more cheerful.
Yes. Yeah. Like just right from the bat, just kind of like go into the depths of the dark sea. Let's let the reader, of the book, get into that story for themselves.
Yeah, you
So
can stumble on that on your own time. But
yeah.
yeah, we were talking about childhood experiences and the joy of discovering something as a child and then continuing on with it as an adult. This story actually had its origins when I was a kid. My father was a huge reader and he enjoyed all sorts of different things. And he was the one who told me my first Chicago ghost stories. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. So I was raised on stories like Resurrection Mary and the Screaming Mummy at the Field Museum and the Ghosts of St. James the Sag. And I was really, really pleased to be able to include these stories in a book that I finally ended up writing. I don't want to say this is the book I was born to write, but it really had its origins in my childhood. And it was such a delight to revisit those stories and to find out the history behind them too.
Yeah, to really, to peel back the onion
Yeah,
and, get to
yeah.
really, because for me, that's what really gets my engine revving is
Oh yeah.
when I find out, when I dig deeper into something and I realize there's so much more going on than potentially what's just on the surface, which is fascinating in itself, right? And attention grabbing, I suppose.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's really cool when you can just really dig deep and get into something, and just it creates a really rich flavor. Now what I love too is, I've just been on this, it's been for a couple of weeks now where I'm just like, okay, I mean, all these different stories of the world and our life is just all these different stories we tell ourselves or other people tell us and things like that. But when it comes to the world of the paranormal and its infiltration into the mainstream in a much more pronounced way, I would say in the last, 5 years or so. I mean, there's always been scary movies, scary books, and things like that, right? But
Yeah.
I think when it comes to people really being earnestly interested in and about paranormal things, and therefore maybe even being more open to believing in such things, I would say that's like, a phenomena that's really been occurring in the last 5 years as far as people really opening themselves up to it.
I
Um,
think you're right, Ryan. Yeah. I mean, you and I are more aware of this than I think the average Joe on the street would be because we are very interested in it. And it's like if you buy a silver pickup truck, then you start noticing silver pickup trucks. But I honestly think you're right. I think people are getting more interested in the paranormal. You see a plethora of paranormal shows on YouTube and on TV and Reddit threads, things like that. People are just really getting into it and finding out that there is a great wealth of storytelling and personal experience with the paranormal, and it's a heck of a lot of fun, and you can learn things from people's experiences too.
100%. The the learning factor, I think, can't be overstated enough.
Yeah.
And when you look at, first of all, I mean, I appreciate what you're doing for lots of reasons, and one of them is you're taking you're creating a historical record of paranormal phenomena. And
I think so, yeah.
I don't, yeah, and I don't think that can be underestimated for, for how important it could potentially be, very long term from now, after you and I are both in a different form, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So long from now. But the the historical records of paranormal activity and the happenings and the occurrences and the phenomena itself is very important. And it's very important to be done in a way that is accessible and is also informative and is also, I guess to a certain degree entertaining for people, but more importantly, something that's, I guess, formalized in a kind of way, is kind of what you're doing.
Yeah,
So you're making the immaterial material.
right. Yeah. And I don't know how you crawled inside my head just then, Ryan, but yeah, that was the first word that was in my mind was accessible and entertaining too. But yeah, I really want people to be able to find this sort of book on the shelf that maybe didn't exist before. That's the real excitement of doing this, is writing a book that nobody's ever written before.
Yeah, the creation of something new.
Yeah.
And it is, it is a thrill to do something like that. I mean, in my own work, writing a joke that's never been written before, things like
Yeah.
that. That's very, it's exciting work to do. I'm curious. Obviously, this book has been a long time coming for you, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious what one of the first stories that you know that your mind latched onto in regards to this specific book that became maybe an anchor piece, or big movie studios will call it their tent pole production, where they
Right.
have a big blockbuster every summer that kind of pays the bills for independent features. Like, is there what was like the first story that just really is like, okay, this is the beginning now?
Oh boy. That would have to be the story of the screaming mummy at the Field Museum. That's one of the first ghost stories I ever heard. And I knew as soon as I figured out I was writing a book on zoos, museums, and amusement parks that story had to be. It was just at the top of my list. Um, so yeah, and the fun thing is, I have known this story since I was 8 years old, and in researching this story in preparation for writing it down, I actually learned things. And that is such a thrill for me to learn something about a story that I've known forever, or discover a new story. But yeah, the thrill of learning something new is incomparable. Um, what I learned is that there are several interesting things about Harwa. His name is Harwa. He is the only ancient Egyptian that archaeologists have ever discovered that is named Harwa. I did not know that. And the other thing I did not know is that Harwa was the very first ancient Egyptian to take a plane ride.
Wait,
So in
wait,
yeah, in
wait, what?
1925, the Field Museum was doing pioneer work in developing an X-ray technique for studying ancient Egyptian mummies and other artifacts. The New York World's Fair in the 1939 got wind of this, and the World's Fair put together a joint exhibit with the General Electric X-ray Corporation and the Field Museum. The museum donated lent the mummy, and the General Electric Corporation did this whole setup. There was a case at the New York World's Fair that was softly lit. It was a backdrop of black velour, so all you could see is this beautiful, colorful mummy case and Harwa standing there. And there was a button next to the case. And so a visitor would come up and push the button, and the light would fade, and the X-ray machine would fire up, and the The mummy would be bathed in 125,000 volts of electricity, which displayed an x-ray of his skeleton on the screen. So you could see what he looked like inside without having to unwrap him.
Oh,
The
wow.
the glass was lead lined. I mean, Harwa didn't mind being zapped with all this electricity many, many, many times a day. He'd been dead for 28 centuries. He didn't care. But in order to protect the fairgoers, they did have the case was made of leaded glass. So Harwa's exhibit was so popular that he was invited back for the 1940 season of the World's Fair. And he attended the 1940s season of the World's Fair by going from Chicago to New York by way of San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
a
is
shipping
that's that I mean I think I'm trying to remember who the was it the band Yes who had the song Roundabout. The
talk
what do
about
we
your frequent flyer miles. Yeah, a shipping clerk lost him.
wait, did he get lost? He got lost?
Yes, yes. A shipping clerk made a mistake and he was lost for a while. And there were panicked telegrams flying back and forth between Chicago and New York and San Francisco. They finally located Harwa and they realized that who they had a distinguished ancient Egyptian. Here was a fellow who had a world traveler from ancient Egypt. So he was actually invited to a number of banquets held by various organizations. And it was joked that they probably welcomed him because he would make no after dinner speeches.
I mean, imagine like getting access to all these things. I mean, only after you're dead. I mean, what a wild post life Harwa's living.
Right. So the those are two of the three interesting things about Harwa. He's the only ancient Egyptian they've ever found named Harwa, and he was the first ancient Egyptian to take a plane ride. The third interesting thing about Harwa is that he screams. This was in 1933. This happened. This was several years before Harwa started his jet-setting adventures. This happened on a winter night before the ancient Egypt exhibit in the Field Museum was redone in the mid 1980s. Um, all of the Egyptian artifacts were housed in one big room, and all the mummies were along one long side of that room in a case arranged basically chronologically. So there was a security guard making his rounds, and he was walking past the Egyptian exhibit, and he heard screaming coming from this big hall. And he blew his whistle to summon the other guards. They all figured that somebody had gotten locked into the museum and just freaked out because they they discovered themselves in a room full of mummies on along one wall. But when they turned on lights and looking for whoever it was that was doing the screaming, they didn't find anyone. They were poking around in the corners. They had their flashlights on. Even though the lights were on, they couldn't find anyone who had done the screaming. And then one of the security guards looked over at that long case and said, "Look here, one of its mummies is off its pedestal." The mummies were arranged on slant boards, and they're about 6 inches of board. These are pretty wide boards at about a 30-degree angle or so. This was how it was set up when I first visited the field as a child. So there was no way for a body to just fall off. I mean, there was a healthy margin of support between the body and the edges of each of these slant boards. But one of the mummies was face down next to his board on the floor of this case. And it fell to Henry Field, who was the curator in physical anthropology from 1926 to 1941. It was his job to go into the case and pick up this mummy and put him back on his slant board. And the thing is that before Henry Field could go into the case, it had to be the air had to be pumped out. It was filled with unbreathable nitrogen gas to avoid any sort of insect infestation of these ancient bodies. So, yeah, the air in the case was not breathable.
Oh, wow.
They had to pump the nitrogen gas out before Field could go in and replace this mummy. So, yeah, weird stuff.
That is that is weird. Now, is this the only account of the scream being heard?
It is. It is. We have this account from Henry Field's 1953 biography, and then that was reprinted in the Field Museum's bulletin several years later. And I think it also made it into the Chicago Tribune.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
yeah,
could see why. I mean,
we have it from
it's a
several sources, but that's the original source is Henry Field's biography that was written in 1953.
what's interesting too is when someone's writing a biography or they're having a a book written about them, if it's not an autobiography, it's you're finding like the most interesting and I guess the biggest things about someone's life that that they contributed to, that shaped them, etc. And in this seemingly just you know very short windowed time frame of an event makes it
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
which means that which to me indicates a couple of things. One, that it is something that Field himself thought was important,
Oh yeah.
and other people also agreed that it was important, and that it was it had a lasting impact.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, I could only imagine hearing screaming and then turning on the lights and finding no one. It would, and then seeing the mummy you know knocked over essentially or whatever. That would, I would probably resign from my security job.
Yeah, I've security guards at museums and other places have the best stories because they're there after hours when it's dark and quiet, and they get to have the coolest experiences, I think.
That's really interesting. That would make for a great series.
Yeah.
Just it's all security stories of the paranormal.
I would
uh
love to do a book just on the stories that have been told by security guards.
yeah, just call it like Night Watch.
Ooh, I
The
like that.
paranormal stories of those guarding the places where no one is, or
Ooh.
whatever, right? Like that would be a really fun, that would be fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love this idea.
Oh man.
What well, Sylvia, let's take a quick break here so we can keep the lights on so I don't get too scared. um just as a reminder to everyone listening, you can get ad-free episodes over at patreon.com/Ryan Singer. $3 a month gets you commercial-free interviews and third-year bonuses. And also there's other content. I just posted the Ryan Singer's comedy notebook over there. The book that I released 7 years ago, I finally made a digital. It's now available on Kindle. 7 years or 6 years later, not seven. But so there's all kinds of other stuff going on over there as well. So patreon.com/Ryan Singer. And we're going to be right back talking with author Sylvia Shults. Okay, so we're back. That's it. I mean, when we're talking about the screaming mummy, and now now my mind is reeling about these, the ghost stories that, security guards around the world have. Just it being able to collect all of those would, I mean, talk about just a gold mine of creepy and fascinating stuff.
It
um
would be incredible.
Now, is there a particular, now my guess is that it shifts, and from time to time, but
Mhm.
I'm curious, maybe it doesn't. Is there like what is Sylvia Shults's wheelhouse? Like if someone starts telling a ghost story and it has to have certain aspects to it that
Mm.
really just you're like, I am not like I will postpone a surgery to hear this story. Like, what are the components? And like for you, what's like just the what to you is like the greatest hits of a ghost story?
Oh man. Well, I always say my favorite person in the world is somebody who can tell me a ghost story I haven't heard yet. I would have to say that my favorite ghost stories involve the human aspect, not just a not just a scream in the night, but a scream in the night that you can point to who was screaming. And I also really enjoy a story if it has a certain sweetness to it. Um, when I was doing what we'll move a little away from the zoos, museums, and amusement parks for just a moment. When I was doing Spirits of Christmas, um, I came across the story of how the Victorians really got into ghost stories at Christmas, and there was a member of the English nobility that would collect the ghost stories that he heard and write them all down in a notebook and bring it out at Christmas and scare the paste out of the kids and grandkids. And the kids absolutely loved it. I mean, they were just eating it up. But I thought, there are so many stories that I read that don't fit into any of the projects that I'm currently working on. And I don't want to forget them because they're so fun and so cool. So I started writing these stories down. And one of the stories that I wrote down happened at um, the that big hotel, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. And there was a fellow there who was staying in the hotel in about 2008, I believe it was, and he opened the window of his hotel room before he went to bed. And he went to bed, went to sleep, and he was awoken a couple hours later by his wife getting out of bed. And she walked over to the open window and stood looking down the curtains. She pushed the curtains apart just a little bit, and she whispered to her husband, she said, "Come here and look. There's a family of elk grazing on the lawn below in the moonlight." And the man just watched his wife standing at the window, and he didn't get up and go over to the window with her. He just watched her and smiled, and you really can't blame him for that because his wife had been dead for 2 years.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, I just chilled up over here. The
Good. Yeah, I love stories like that that have that connection with the lost loved one.
yeah, wow. That's because when you're at first I was like, okay, what does she see? And then you said the elk, and I was like, oh, cool, a family of ghost elk. This is going to be awesome. And then no, it was her. Wow, that's
Yeah,
I
that is
do.
one of my top five favorite ghost stories.
Yeah, I could see why. I do love that, like that human element, and the bond between people that
Yeah,
traverses space and time
yeah,
and dimensions apparently. And there's something that's so visceral and so strong about this energy that is love and memories and just the all the other emotions that go into it that kind of, I guess, they bind us to each other.
yeah, yeah. I won't say this fellow's name on the air, but because of privacy issues, but um, I recently met a fellow at one of my book sightings who had just lost his wife of over 50 years. And he shared a story with me that he was absolutely devastated. He was her caregiver for quite some time. And he told me that at her funeral, they were sitting by the graveside service, and her coffin was sitting at the graveside in preparation for burial, and there was an arrangement of roses on top of her casket. And this man swears to me that one of the roses fell out of the arrangement, fell off the top of the casket, and rolled to his feet. He was
Oh,
not the only person who saw it. His son, his daughter in law, everyone who was at this graveside service saw this happen.
oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of story that'll make you cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can you be a skeptic when you hear this stuff? Yeah.
What? Oh my gosh.
It's like, who wants to live in that world where you're just like, oh, I don't believe that? Like, that's one of the greatest things you could ever hear happening at a funeral.
Seriously.
And
Seriously.
oh man, that is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the human connection for you is in, and there's like, you like a ghost story that's got heart to it.
Yeah.
Uh
That's
and
paramount.
yeah, and I mean, because the oftentimes I think, there's a difference between something like that and obviously in like you know the the stories to be told around a bonfire, like
Yeah.
there was a man who lost his arm in a logging accident, and now every third Friday you
These
can
very
hear
woods.
these very words for children who don't do their homework. Because apparently in the afterlife, ghosts are, these scary ghosts are very concerned about the behavior of children.
Indeed,
um
yes.
and kids better be behaving. Ghosts hate kids who misbehave. That's one thing we do know. um
Mhm.
okay, so this is interesting because you've got a life dedicated to hearing, writing down, accumulating ghost stories. And you said something interesting that was, uh, my favorite person is someone who can tell me a ghost story I haven't heard. And so I'm curious, like, how often does that even happen outside of, like, I mean, obviously the story you just told, I think would qualify as one, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
It happens for me probably every more often than once a year, probably every 10 months or so. I go to a lot of book signings and a lot of conventions, and people, I just have one of those faces, I guess. People come up to me and they want to share their experiences with me, and I will always listen. I will never ever poo-poo someone's experience or say that it didn't happen or say, oh, that's nuts, that's impossible. That I will never ever ever say that to someone. um, there are a lot of times when the story someone will tell me or the story I'll read is a variation on the theme. um, Somebody was murdered in the house and there's blood stain on the floor that you can't get up. um, they're they walk into the kitchen and all the cabinet doors are open and all the pots and pans are in the pile on the floor. There are themes in ghost stories, and it is such a thrill for me, and I hope to my readers, when I can find a story that has that little frisson of something different, like the rose falling off and rolling to this person's feet.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's, these themes that you talk about, because I'm hyper fascinated by the the stories that we've been I'm fascinated by the stories we've been fascinated by as just human creatures
Uh-huh.
since before written history, so prehistorical. The because I love this idea that the paranormal, different aspects of the paranormal, and religion and all these other things ultimately are these stories, and they're these mirrors, I think, in many ways, for what we hope to become and what we strive for as people, and what we know intuitively we can be, right? Whether it's aliens who are peace loving and saving the earth, and they've moved past the brutality of the human creature and wars and things like that, right? To
Yeah.
me, that's like us projecting these qualities onto to these characters in this story of like, this is what we know we have to become, right?
Oh
um
yeah.
in ghost stories, it's connecting with those that we've lost, and because we tell ourselves these stories because we know that we want to remain connected, even after life, to
Oh
those, even
yes.
after we die or the ones we love die, right? So these are the stories that we latch onto and that fascinate us the most, because there's something really inherently at their core that resonates so deeply with us. And I think it's because they're probably true, first of all,
Mhm.
and they also have a message for us, right? And I'm curious, when you talk about these themes that are in all of these different ghost stories, do you find that there's an overall message coming through, or is it simply that there's just, like the themes you're talking about, like the cabinets were open, or the blood couldn't get the blood out of the floor, etc.?
Well, think I think that ghost stories have been around for a very, very long time. And I don't personally have any recollection of life between lives, but it is quite possible that there are spirits that are aware of the tropes. And that is the easiest way, that's kind of a shorthand for paranormal activity. Oh, you know what?
Oh.
I can open these cabinet doors and people will know I'm here. Um,
Oh, okay.
my favorite example of this goes back to, we'll take the Peoria State Hospital for an example. Um, the spirit of Rhoda Derry is a spirit, an intelligent haunting that knows her own ghost lore. If the ghost lore of Rhoda Derry is that if you if you smell chewing tobacco and you feel a tugging on your pants leg, that means that Rhoda Derry is around and wants to let you know that she's there. In the afterlife, I've been told by several psychic mediums that Rhoda is not a hunched figure crabbing along the floor anymore. She is whole and tall and beautiful on the other side. But she knows that if you just see some beautiful Victorian lady walking around the hilltop, you won't know who that is. But if she kneels down and tugs on your pants leg, then you will know for an absolute fact that it's Rhoda Derry trying to get your attention. So it always fascinates me when there is an intelligent haunting that knows their own ghost lore and is able to communicate in a way that lets you know who it is that you're dealing with.
Wow, I mean, that's a whole nother level of intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. I was thrilled to bits when I figured that out. Now we were talking about stories that I hadn't heard before or themes that weren't as familiar. Um, I'll share with you one of the stories in Gone on Vacation. Uh, One of the zookeepers that I wrote about. It was interesting to me to do this section on haunted zoos because people were like, well, is it the animals haunting the zoos or is it the zookeepers or what? And I was able to say, well, you know what? It's both. There are ghost animals and there are zookeepers that loved their jobs so much that they never left the zoos that they used to take care of. One of the zoos that I wrote about was the Alexandria Zoological Park in Virginia. A former zookeeper there was a man by the name of Les Witt, Robert Leslie Witt, who went by Les. And he was devoted to the Alexandria Zoo. He brought it back from the brink of bankruptcy. He was instrumental in designing new habitats for the animals. He was absolutely devoted to this zoo. So when he passed away, he had heart problems in his adult life, and he actually had a heart transplant and survived uh, for several years after the transplant, but he was never a very well man. But he seized this second chance at life and threw himself into designing habitats. But he did pass away in 2008, only 6 days before his 57th birthday. So he died very, very young. But he was beloved by the entire community. His visitation and funeral had to be held at the Alexandria Riverfront Center, this huge auditorium to accommodate the thousands and thousands of people that came for his funeral. So Les Witt is actually the ghost that still haunts the Alexandria Zoological Park. And his larger than life personality and his friendly sense of humor still comes through in his haunting. He will tickle guests' ears and make his presence known that way. And my personal favorite out of the paranormal experiences that you can have at the Alexandria Zoo is that um, Les was devoted to his animals, and there are times when you'll be walking around, and you'll be passing maybe the monkey cage or something, and the monkeys will just start getting really, really excited for no reason that you can see. And that probably means that Les is around. But one of my favorite stories is the fact that people have claimed to hear these intimidating, terrifying growling noises coming from certain zoo enclosures, and they look over and it's a perfectly harmless animal in the cage. It's like a gazelle or something. Hear these horrible, these intimidating noises coming from the fluffy bunny pen or something.
That's ridiculous. The
Isn't it great?
that is great. It's a friend. It's a wonderful reminder that when it comes to the idea of hauntings or ghosts or spirits, that these were people,
Oh,
and and in the heart and soul of a person, and can remain, and often, and like in this case, is clearly does. And
mm,
this intelligence that's behind understanding, like a self-awareness that these ghosts have, or these spirits, these people have in the afterlife. It's really, really cool to think about that. And I guess I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about the self-awareness that a spirit has. And it's almost as if there's like Ghosts for Dummies books handed out as soon as you die, right? like
right, right.
like
I'm
in the
told it
Beetlejuice,
takes.
in the lounge of Beetlejuice. It's like, here's your manual. Get caught up on this was made for you.
Yeah, I'm told it does take a bit of acclimatization when one first gets over onto the other side. But yeah, if people take away anything from the books that I write, I want it to be this: ghosts were people too, and the spirit and the personality survive beyond death.
That's
We're
awesome.
made of energy. Yeah, and that's one of the laws of thermodynamics, is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. This energy has to go somewhere, and this energy still survives. And if a personality is strong enough that it can make this energy respond to living people in a way that is recognizable as a fellow human, that's great. Sometimes they're not strong enough to do that. Sometimes they're not aware enough to do that, but that energy still survives.
Yeah, I love this. I love this idea. And let's talk more about this after another one more our last little break here. And just a reminder, patreon.com/Ryan Singer, $3 a month gets you ad free all the episodes. So we're going to be right back and we're going to talk more about the survival of energy. And I want to remember to bring up the personality aspect of this. And we're going to be right back with Sylvia Shults. Okay, so we are back. We're in the home stretch. Energy can't be created nor destroyed. We're talking about the personality. If you know, I guess I hesitate to say if it's big enough, a big enough personality, but it just makes me want to like, oh, I got to really build up my personality even bigger now because I definitely want to live a life worth haunting. You know what I mean? I want to 100% be a recognizable no gray area here. Singer is clearly haunting this space.
No doubt about it.
There
Yeah.
is no doubt about it. um i I mean, okay, let me pivot from what I was going to ask you to this. Do you intend to be a ghost yourself?
Heck yeah.
Okay, so tell me what's going to be the Sylvia ghost moves. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? What are you manipulating? What are you creating? How do people know it's going to be you?
Oh, I think my modus operandi of haunting would be to give people a feeling of quiet hope and satisfaction. I want people to, and you hear about spirits giving people a sense of being watched or a sense of foreboding. I don't want to do that. I want people to be comfortable. There was one of the haunted museums I visited in England when I went this past summer was the Haunted Museum in Nottingham, which is a collection of haunted artifacts. And one of the artifacts there is a doll named Happy Hattie. She's about 3 feet tall, and she sits there surrounded by her toys. And her ghost lore is that I have no idea what human spirit is attached to this doll, but the doll's name is Happy Hattie. And she wants everyone to be as happy as she is. And if you greet her and have a little conversation with her, she will send you pleasant dreams. And what better legacy as a spirit could you have other than that? To send people pleasant dreams. We spend a third of our lives asleep. And if you can make that dreaming pleasant, why not?
Totally. Finally, a good haunted doll I can get behind.
Right? Well, if you mess with her toys, then she gets upset with you. So don't mess with her toys and you'll be fine.
You don't have to tell me twice. I I will not do anything to instigate a haunted doll. That's there's very few things that I can definitively say will never change about me. And one
Yeah.
of them
Yeah.
is that I
Don't mess
will
with the big boxes. You don't mess with haunted dolls. Rules to
well,
live by.
yeah, yeah, I mean totally. That's okay. So I mean, I got to be honest. Your answer was much more evolved than my answer. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna, turn people's blenders on so they think I'm making a milkshake. Um, yours was like, I want people to have a feeling of quiet hope. Oh, wow, like that's just such a better answer. Um, okay, so I think it's something fun to think about for sure for people is how will you haunt? And I know people, I think it's probably one of the most fun ways to confront our own mortality in a very lighthearted way
Yeah.
to pose this question to people. um but there's people listening who are like, okay, so Sylvia has been dedicating her life to listening to, collecting, and writing ghost stories. She clearly is fascinated with death and with the other side and with ghosts and spirits. And I think that would be, I suppose, fair to say.
Mhm.
I They might want to know, has it always been this way? We're going to kind of touch back on the touchstone of the origins here a little bit, but I mean, obviously you have other interests in your life as well.
Yeah.
Cheeseburger tacos is one of those. But when it comes to the ultimate fascination that you are currently devoting your life to, is there an aspect or a succinct way of, outside of the people, ghosts were people too, or are people too, is
Mhm.
there something that you can define it as that is, at the heart of it all for you, at the heart of all this work?
Well, I've always been fascinated with history because of the people involved. I really believe that you can't understand the ghost stories of a location without knowing the history, because that's why we have the stories, is because of these people's lived experiences, that went before us. It's I don't want to say it's anything as grand as time travel, but it is sort of a way of time traveling, and a way of reaching out to touch the people that went before us and the personalities that came before us. And to realize that even if we're separated by decades or centuries, even, we still have the same hopes and dreams and fears and loves and likes and dislikes. Um, yeah, it's just a way to connect. That's what fascinates me, is this sense of connection.
I mean, well said. I love it as an idea of time travel, and I don't think that's too grandiose at all to say that. I'm curious because it is my feeling and my sense, which oftentimes are way off the mark. But the whole entire ghost world, or whatever we want to call it, understands that you are a person that will listen. Okay. So,
Yes,
do you know what I'm getting at here?
I do, and I have been told that. I There's a friend of mine that is a psychic medium, and she listens to the spirit box quite often, and if a message comes through that pertains to me, she will tell me about it. I have the reputation on the other side of going to cemeteries, and especially the graves of children, and leaving candy on the graves. I went to Casey Cemetery in outside of Louisville, Kentucky, and there are a lot of children's graves there. And of course, I brought my Swedish fish to put on the graves. And very shortly after that, my friend Liz was listening to the spirit box, and someone asked her, "Hey, are you the one who put the candy on the graves?" And she said, "Nope, that would be Sylvia."
Wow.
So yeah, I have this reputation now on the other side of being the lady who brings candy.
That's such a great idea to do that.
Yeah,
It's such a thoughtful thing to do. I mean, it doesn't surprise me in the least that you're, the candy lady, that everybody knows you. I mean, you do investigations, you do all this stuff. I mean, you're dedicating your waking life to the accumulation and telling the stories for people who no longer have the voice to tell them themselves, at least in a way so tangible or
exactly.
material, as the way you're doing it. So it's almost, God, I'm trying to think of the of this word that's on the tip of my mind, but you're advocating for them, essentially, and telling their story, and you know ensuring that history is more complete and more full, because that's what I love about the the composition of such things, of historical records, is we are enriching history. We are rounding it out. We're filling it up.
Yeah.
And it's no longer, because I think when most people think about history, the first ideas that pop into their mind are like, there was this war, and there was this
Just a
king, and
list of dates.
yeah, right. And so it's it's like, no, no, there's so much more to history than just who was the Lord King, and who had the biggest army, and
Right.
when did the borders of this country become the borders of this country. And it's there's so much more going on, and this is a great example of that.
Yeah.
um the I'm curious if there is an aspect of your, you know dare I call it, a love affair with, the other
Sure, go
side.
ahead.
um is there an aspect to this career of yours and this life that you've built that hasn't quite yet been engaged, but you're headed into a direction? Like, I don't even know what this question means, other than I get the sense that there might be a component of what you do that is getting built out in the very near future, or it's on the horizon for you, whether it is teaching of some kind, or something like that. Does this
Mm.
question make sense at all?
Sort of. I really don't have any aspirations of that. I just want to write books and have people read them and enjoy them. I don't, I feel like, I feel that I am much more effective as a teacher when I am behind the scenes and simply working on the books and putting my words down on paper for many people to enjoy instead of just being in front of a classroom. That's that's what I do. Right now, I'm working on a book of straight true crime with a co-author, and he keeps telling me every once in a while, "Oh, you're gonna give up the ghost stories. You're just gonna do straight true crime from here on out." And every time he says that, I'm like, "No, no, I can't give up my paranormal nonfiction. I just can't do it. It's part of me.
Yeah.
It's what I do. I mean, true crime is great, but and the Grave Deeds and Dead Plots series is true crime stories that resulted in hauntings. So I'm expanding my wheelhouse just a bit with the true crime, but I will never give up writing my ghost stories.
Well, that's good to hear. um God, I just see like a children's book or something. In you like This is, who knows what the future holds. Let's focus on Gone on Vacation. I mean, this just came out, and I'm over here trying to get you to like work on a new project, in a
Oh, I
brand new
have
arena.
several new projects in the works.
Do you want to tease any of them for everybody listening?
Sure. Well, I I know there's going to be a second volume of Gone on Vacation. I
Oh,
was
okay.
yeah. Oh my gosh. So I was doing another radio interview a couple weeks ago with a lovely English lady, and I have been just head over heels for England and Scotland ever since I was in high school. And I just got back from my third trip there. So I would I just love the country. I love the people. So I was having this marvelous conversation with this lovely English lady, and we were talking about Gone on Vacation, and she mentioned a couple of living history towns in England. One's in England and one's in Wales. And I thought to myself, and I said aloud to her, this light bulb just came on. I said, I never even thought of living history museums. Oh my gosh. And I started doing a little bit of research. I mean, I'm kind of committed to this true crime project right now, but I started doing a little research, and sure enough, Plymouth Plantation, there's been paranormal activity there, which thrills me to bits because I have a Mayflower ancestor. Jamestown, Old Colonial Williamsburg, they've all got paranormal activity going on, which is just thrilling to me. So there will definitely be a second volume of Gone on Vacation.
Wow.
And then the true crime story that I'm working on right now is, do you remember last May there was a jailbreak in Alabama, Florence, Alabama? There was a female assistant director of the jail
who
broke out.
assisted.
Yep. Helped the prisoner escape, and they went on the run for 11 days. Vicky White and Casey White. That's the book that my co-author and I are working on right now.
Oh, excellent. Now they had the same last name. Did they get married, or was that just a
They
coincidence?
did not. It was just pure happenstance.
That's just
He
so,
referred
that's to me so
her
weird.
as his wife, but they were not actually married. It's
But
just one of those things.
wow, that's just, I mean, to me, that's bonkers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's just the
Well,
beginning.
no.
That's just the beginning of the bonkers thing. I could only imagine. Well, yeah, that would
Oh
be
boy,
fast.
oh
That'd be a
boy.
fascinating story to get to the nuts and bolts of it, and be like,
Oh
well,
man.
why did this, or how did this happen? And
We're in the research part of it right now, and boy, oh boy, the stuff we're uncovering is just, whew. Yeah.
oh well, that's exciting. Well,
Mhm.
Sylvia, this has been great. I'm so happy to get you back on the show. Let's where can people get their hands on Going on Vacation?
Well, of course, it's available on Amazon, and it is available as an ebook as well as a print book. But I like to send people to bookshop.org. Amazon doesn't need our help. Amazon's doing just fine. But when you make a purchase from bookshop.org, part of your purchase price goes into a fund, and that fund gets divvied up between a whole bunch of independent bookstores. So it's a great way to support indie bookstores with your purchase.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that is
That's really cool.
bookshop.org. And if you go to sylviashults.wordpress.com, you can find links to all of the books and links to my podcast, Lights Out. And I have several English episodes, several of the UK episodes that are going to be posted very soon. One's already up, but several more are coming in the very near future.
That's really cool. And I will link I'll link the WordPress, also link the link to the book through bookshop.org in the show notes for everybody listening, so you can just easily find that. That's really cool. I did not know about bookshop.org. I got to investigate this, and I got to snoop around. This is cool.
Yeah. I sound like a commercial every time I say that, but it really is. It's a very wonderful way to support independent bookstores, and that's so important these days. I mean, you've got this big, huge Amazon conglomerate, and it's really wonderful that we have the opportunity to, even if we can't go to each little bookstore in person and pet the bookstore cat and curl up in a corner with our favorite book, we can still support them even buying online.
Yeah, indeed. That's excellent. That's excellent. There's this, it just reminds me of Viewpoint Books in Columbus, Indiana. I don't know if you've ever been there. This beautiful bookstore in Columbus, Indiana, run by Beth. And, but yeah, so I'm sure like these bookstores, these independent bookstores, they need to be here. We need them. And I love them so much. And I loved this chat. Sylvia, thank you for chatting today and, sharing some of the stories from the new book. And like I said, I'll be linking all that in the show notes for everybody. And is there anything else, you wanted to mention before we wrap this up?
Oh boy. Keep your sense of wonder, everybody.
Indeed.
Read my books, read other people's books, and never stop reading, and never stop learning, and never stop enjoying.
That is the key. That is the key. Always be seeking, and you shall find. Well, we have concluded another wonderful episode with Sylvia Shults, the author of Gone on Vacation. we can hope for the third conversation, but not 4 years later. And I'll be able to tell you how much I loved the cheeseburger taco, because I guarantee I'll be in Mason City Comedy Club, not too far away from that joint, sometime in the next year, let alone 4 years. So this has been great, Sylvia. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely brilliant to talk to you, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Of course.